Good afternoon. This is Diana Raggio with the Indiana Office of Community and Rural Affairs. And thank you for attending this webinar to walk through the letter of intent with the Next Level Connections Broadband Grant Program. We just want to quickly introduce those of us on the call from our office. So again, my name is Diana Raggio. I'm the Next Level Connections Broadband Grant Program Director.
Hello, everyone. I'm Adam Serves. I'm the Program Manager with Grant Services, and I'm going to be working very closely with Diana and yourselves on this next NLC round.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Thomas. I'm the Communications Manager for OCRA. I will be mostly behind the scenes, but if you have any questions about needing graphics or you have questions dealing with the press, please give me a call or email.
In the agenda for today's phone call, we just wanted to quickly talk about the background of the Office of Community and Rural Affairs and where broadband fits within the program. We want to talk about the Broadband Grant Program moving into Round 2, including the changes from Round 1 and then also some of the eligibility components that are outlined in the legislation. We're also going to walk through the 2 templated documents. So this includes the Letter of Intent PDF and the Census Block List Excel tables. For any questions that you may have during this webinar or afterwards, for those during the webinar, please submit via chat. And any questions that you have about the program, about the Letter of Intent, full application, or any other general broadband questions, those can be submitted at any time to the nlc@ocra.in.gov email address. It is also listed on our website, and we are responding within a timely window to answer your questions. We will also be posting a frequently asked questions on our resources page, so please continue to check there for any updates. So the vision for the Office of Community and Rural Affairs is to work with Indiana communities to build relevant and economically thriving places where people want to live, grow, work, and play. Broadband fits directly into this as it is a really essential component to business operation and also quality of life. OCRA works directly with local and state and national partners to provide resources and technical assistance to aid communities in shaping and achieving their vision for economic development. The 4 competencies of the office include capacity building, economic development, quality of place, and infrastructure. And you can see that the broadband program fits directly under the infrastructure competency. So moving into Round 2 of the Next Level Connections Broadband Grant Program, this is a continuation from Governor Holcomb's announcement of the program back in 2018. We had our first round in 2019 and awarded about $28 million in funding. There still remains about $70 million to be given out in competitively selected grants through this program. For Round 2, the application was released last week after Governor Holcomb announced his 2020 agenda. And this is just a flow diagram of kind of the high-level components of the program for Round 2. So one of the things that we have instituted is a letter of intent. So the letter of intent will be due as of January 6th. That information will contain the census block list and also a brief abstract from the project. That information will then be published on our website and initiate the challenge period. The challenge period is required to be open for 30 days, and this allows incumbent providers to challenge your potential application of service. Once the challenges are submitted, the office will be reviewing those for validity based also on the content and form that is required to be submitted. Once we've made determinations of those decisions will be published on our website and be available. There will be a window between the challenge decision publication and the full application due date, and this is to allow applicants the opportunity to make final adjustments before submitting their full application. So this may be an opportunity where you want to include an additional unserved evidence or potentially remove census blocks that perhaps no longer meet economies of scale if they received a challenge. Ultimately, that is up to you as the applicant how you would like to handle that. But once full applications are due, we will be performing a compliance review to ensure that each application meets the content and form requirements as laid out in the application document. Then we will move into the internal review panel period, where these applications will be reviewed and scored by a panel of state agency representatives. Once we have reviewed and scored all of those applications, we will also be assessing the preferences that were outlined in the legislation, and those include whether unincorporated areas were included in the grant application, whether the local match is 50% or more, and then whether there was any third-party infrastructure. Once we've done our assessment and made recommendations for selections, this will be reviewed with the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor's Office, and then eventually a public announcement will be made of those awards that we are selecting. And we are estimating that to be around May 1st of 2020. There is a schedule at the end of this slide deck. So just to highlight the changes in process from round 1 to round 2, we implemented a letter of intent phase. This was based on feedback that we received through many stakeholder meetings and feedback meetings with first round applicants. This allows us to also assess resources and capacity that we'll need for the review period once we move into the full application phase. We also are conducting the challenge phase prior to full application submission. This was based on additional feedback relative to allowing applicants the opportunity to potentially remove census blocks that would receive a challenge, or the challenge phase was also moved to earlier in the process because the information contained is mostly public information, and so we felt that this would be the best time in the schedule to accommodate this requirement and also allow applicants some flexibility in a potentially longer application period along with the adjustment to their application. And I do want to emphasize that the focus does remain on the unserved census blocks of Indiana. And this is defined as census blocks that have either no broadband provider available or they are currently at service levels of less than 10.1. Some of the eligibility requirements are some things that we wanted to emphasize today on this phone call based on previous feedback that we received. These are outlined in Indiana Code and were derived from Senate Bill 460 that was in legislation last year. One of the components is the definition of eligible broadband service, and entities must be able to provide a fixed terrestrial connection to the internet. So this means no mobile or satellite carriers. Otherwise, the office is considered technology agnostic, and we are not picking specific technology types as long as it is a fixed connection. And eligible service is defined as a minimum actual speed of 25 megabytes downstream and 3 megabytes upstream. This also falls in line with the FCC's current definition of broadband. The legislation also outlines what is considered an eligible entity, and so they must be considered a qualified broadband provider as defined in the Indiana Code, and then you must demonstrate financial and technical and operational capability. If you are unsure of whether you qualify as a broadband provider, we can refer you to the specific code language for you to assess. Some of the other eligibility components include eligible project area. As you can see here on this slide, this is a map from our Indiana Broadband page, which all of the green dots are showing currently funded census blocks that were funded in the first round. Those are the clear and eligible project areas. So any census block that has already received funding is not eligible to receive funding moving forward with the NLC broadband program. Otherwise, the focus remains on the unserved census blocks. But again, the map is a starting point. We do recognize that the data from the FCC, while it is the best large data set available, it has many flaws. And so ultimately, we are relying on you as the applicant to make the case and provide evidence as to why a block may truly be unserved, even though it may show as served on the map. So this is up to you as to how you want to approach that within your application. There are specific questions within the project narrative, but we will get into that more under the full application webinar that will be held in January. For the purposes of the letter of intent, any census block could be submitted at this time. We are not making eligibility determinations relative to census blocks. We will only be looking at whether you meet the eligibility requirements as an entity and whether you are providing an eligible level of service for the proposed project. One of the other components is eligible costs. These remain the same as they were in the first round, which is capital terrestrial expenditures. So any costs related directly to design, engineering, permitting, actual construction, the program will not be paying for any operational or maintenance expenses. And there still is a match requirement of a minimum of 20% for local match, and in-kind expenses are not allowable. For the letters of intent submissions, entities may submit more than one letter of intent, provided that each describes a unique project area, and ultimately each full application must have an individual letter of intent submitted previously. So to be eligible to submit a full application, you must submit a letter of intent. If you would like to submit multiple letters of intent to be able to submit multiple applications, you may do so. That is ultimately your decision as the applicant. We also have seen in the past applications that contained sub-project areas but were only one application. You may do that as well. That is your decision as an applicant, but you have the option to submit multiple letters of intent. So getting into the letter of intent PDF one-pager, this is the top section of the applicant information. It is a fillable PDF. So we're just looking for kind of the high-level information of the name of your organization, the title of your project, who is the project manager and their contact information, and then if you have a business contact and their information. Some of you may not have that, but it could be somebody like a grant writer or even a financial contact within your organization, but that's up to you. The second section is the business information, and this really relays back to the eligible entity requirements as outlined in the legislation, that you must be a registered Indiana business that has been serving broadband customers for the previous 3 years at a minimum of 100 end users. So you would want to include your registered business ID, and that's your ID number with the Secretary of State, your business creation date, which is also available through the Secretary of State if you don't happen to have that immediately on hand, and then your Indiana bidder number if you have that available. And then outlining the total Indiana customers served for the previous 3 years. So this would be broadband or telecommunications customers that you've been serving for the last 3 years that meet that requirement. And then the final section on the PDF is the project information. This is just a really high level of your proposed project. So you would want to select the maximum speed level that would be provided by the proposed project. If for some reason the speed level is not listed, please select the lower option for the purposes of the LOI. And then for the grant request and the match amount, we understand that these amounts may change at the full application phase, so we are recommending that you just include an estimate here at this time. The grant request cannot be more than $5 million. That is a requirement of the program. And then the match amount should be at least 20% of whatever your grant request is. You will have the opportunity to make adjustments to those based on the development of your full application, and the numbers that you submit at the time of full application will be what is considered binding with the state, and we will hold you to those numbers and percentages. And then the final component of this is the brief abstract. The abstract should not be greater than 250 words and should just provide a brief description of the proposed project. We don't want you to get into a ton of detail here. We really just want a description of the area that you're planning to target, the speed levels, and if you feel that there's any other relevant information to your project, this will be public. So please keep that in mind, not to disclose any business sensitive information in this description. So we're going to move into the census block list document. I'm going to have Adam Surveys go through that with you all.
Hello again, everyone. So this census block list is an Excel sheet. It's got 3 tabs. First is going to be instructions. That's going to walk you through how to fill out everything, basically. So if you don't remember everything I say here on the webinar, just refer back to the instructions tab and you'll be ready to go. Second, the census block list tab is where you're actually going to list out all of these census blocks that you want to include in this letter of intent and then later in the application. So we want to be sure that in the census block list that you have true census blocks listed. Those should be 15 digits long, and they should all start with 18. That's the state code for Indiana. So we've put in some validation on the spreadsheet there. Also, make sure that you don't include a census tract that would include multiple census blocks. We want the actual census block numbers. So just go ahead and include all of those. Don't just put a census tract and think we'll include all of those census blocks. And then column B, C, and D, households, businesses, and anchor institutions. Just put the number of passings that you know or think you'll pass within that census block. And we are including farms as businesses. I know that was a big question in round 1. And then anchor institutions would be like a library, public facility, town hall, something like that. And again, we have some examples in the instructions tab. So E, will the block be partially or fully served? We have a drop down here for you. It's going to say partially served or fully served. So if you know you're going to serve that full block, put that in. If it's going to be partial, put that in. And then if it is partial, in column F, you'll see we're going to ask what percentage of that census block is currently served. So just give your best guess, whether that's 3/4 or 2/3 or 66%, 75%, whichever. G, if the block is partially served, what provider currently serves the census block? So just put whoever is currently there. If it's more than one provider, just put both of their names in or all of their names in, whichever is applicable. And then lastly, we have the preferences. So does this census block include an unincorporated area? That's just a simple yes or no. And then same thing for the third party. That's going to be a yes or no. If you're going to use someone's polls, for example, that would be a yes for that census block. That third party infrastructure will be utilized. But I really just want to stress again, make sure the census blocks are correct. That's the biggest part here. So that's it for the second tab of this worksheet. Then we're going to go to the address level data. So here, just want to call out, the state should always be Indiana. Please put IN for all that. And then you'll see again here at the last column, we're asking for that census block number again. We've got the same thing, 15 digits. It should start with 18 for Indiana, and then just list any of those addresses that you would have for those census blocks. So this address level data is not required at the letter of intent. It is going to be required for your full application, but we did want to give you the option, if you just want to provide that now, you can at the letter of intent stage. But again, it's not required for letter of intent, but it will be required at the full application. So for the letter of intent, the main page you need to focus on is the application page, where you're going to list out the census block, the passings, and whether it's partially or fully served, and those preferences of being unincorporated or using third-party infrastructure. Now we'll go back to the slides here, and you can see here we have the timeline, and this is going to be in the application as well in your published documents. All right, so you now should be able to see the timeline on the webinar here. So this will also be in the application documents, but we just wanted to give you a rundown of it as well here. So applications have been issued, the letter of intent webinar, which we're going over right now, and then the deadline for the letters of intent, that's going to be January 6th. So be sure you hit this deadline. You have the full time